Good evening. Thank you for being with us for our Movers and Shakers series. And we're really delighted that you are here with us to join in a discussion with Ruby Yang from Hong Kong to the Oscars. And Ruby is somebody that really needs no introduction, but we're really thankful that she can join us for tonight for discussion. And we really want to thank the Ng Teng Feng Charitable Foundation for sponsoring this. This idea of Mover Shaker is really to share with you some of the experiences of these incredible mover and shakers, how they've gone from where they were and to where they are today. And in the case of Ruby winning an Oscar, if you guys have been doing the math, there hasn't been that many Asian or Asian Americans who have won an Oscar, and also let alone an Asian American female. And so I know when I first saw on TV, um, I was really excited because I had not even seen the movie. It was Blood of Ingzhou District, and to see somebody, and remember, this is before. Now we kind of take it for granted seeing Crazy Rich Asians and other Asians, other red carpet. But when I did watch it, this was what, in the 90s, 2000, well, it was 2007, but I just remember really being excited to see somebody who looked like me winning an Oscar and making a movie that was at that time, since I hadn't seen the movie, but the topic sounded really interesting. So Ruby is a member of the Director Guilds of America and also a member of the Academy, who now is a lot more diverse than it was. And she is originally from Hong Kong, and her journey took her from Hong Kong to study in the States, and now she's back teaching or part of the Hong Kong Documentary Initiative. And in fact, I just went through my newspaper and saw this. If you have not seen it, and some of us still read the newspaper, the back page of the city section and has a wonderful story about M from Malaysia, which I think Ruby can talk about a little bit, that she helped with. And there's been several documentaries that recently I've seen. The one in Hong Kong, my hope, my life, my voice, my life, which was really dramatic. That was done a few years ago about some of the youth in Hong Kong, and thanks to I've seen quite a few. I think most of your documentaries, and one of them that really inspired me. And later on, I became the director of Museum Chinese in America, and that is a documentary made in 2003 called "Becoming American," and really big story of Chinese in America. So with that, that's a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ruby and going through some of her um, experiences, and we'll come back and do a kind of a discussion, and then open up questions by all of you. So get your questions ready. And Ruby, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for coming and move forward if so that we feel a little bit more people and cozy, if you don't mind. Um, I'm just going to show a few of the trailers, the film that I made. Um, as Alice has said that I was born in Hong Kong and moved to the state in the 1970, 77, and then start making short films during art school. That was in the late 70s, early 80s. I was making avant-garde films, really just changing from a painter to a filmmaker, using the camera as my brush. And at that time was using 16 millimeter, 16 films, and doing short films, and want to be cool and be a independent filmmaker, making avant-garde films, not thinking about being a documentary filmmaker, or try to change the world by making films. But that comes a slow process, because I think for filmmaker or being making your own film, you have to have life experience, and life experience is very important, because then you learn about life, you make mistake, and have failures, and all those things are so important, because um, at least at my age, I know that that's very important. And you guys are a lot more lucky because, you know, you can make a film much easier now. You know, you take up a DSL camera and with one person or with a sound person, a crew of two people, you can make films and you can have all kinds of platform. You can have put it on YouTube, Youku, whatever you name it, and there are also Netflix who will buy your film. You know, but it's not so easy. But you can at least put your film up and getting eyeballs. But that was not the case when I started. You have to make your own short films, cutting in films, and labor in a dark room. And then, you know, once you make the film, you submit it into film festival, and then you have a film screening. Hopefully, your friends and people will come, and it's to a very small group of people, and television then have a chance to show short films or films done by Asian American. That all started in the 80s, mid 80s. So, you know, how many years? It's like 30 years. There's a lot of changes, and there's a lot of opportunity for young people to show their work and become storyteller. But I think I always tell young people and young filmmaker, and what do you want to say in your film? What's the subject? What you want to express? Because even making a film is easier nowadays, but it takes energy. It takes a lot of your work to make a film. But if you don't have a story or don't have a theme, then it's just something that you made for fun. And of course, that's also okay because, you know, films come in many forms. But if you want to make a very impactful film, and you do have to have research, you do have, you know, research your subject, you have to find very good subject, you do have, you know, to plan your filming, you have to, you know, do a lot of work in order to make the film. So after graduated, I made a couple of short films, and I then later on get into film editing, because film editing is a great way, especially in documentary, uh, to craft your story. And for 10, 15 years, I was an editor on documentaries and also on feature-length film, narrative film. And that's where I really perfected my crafts in storytelling and also learning all the crafts to make a good film, a film that can be screened on a big screen on for movies, for theater. Um, and fast forward to 1997, I decided to make my own first feature documentary. That was Citizen Hong Kong, and that was done with uh, funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcast. In 97, remember in Hong Kong, it was the return of Hong Kong to China. It was a big event. A lot of focus was on Hong Kong. So I applied for grants. I got, you know, the funding, and I came back in 96 and 97 and to film for a year. And then I spent almost a year to edit the film, and it was aired on it was show at the Asian American Film Festival, International Asian American Film Festival in 1999, and then it got air in about 200 something station in the U.S. So maybe we can show the trailer for Citizen Hong Kong.
My family left Hong Kong in 1977. While I have lived in America for 20 years, I still consider Hong Kong my home. In the summer of 1997, I returned to Hong Kong to witness for myself its historic transition.
5 hours from now, the Union flag will be lowered and the flag of China will fly over Hong Kong. More than a century and a half of British administration will come to an end.
Growing up Chinese in a British colony, I felt ambivalent about its legacy. The handover, so long anticipated, brought an end to a whole era. It also stranded me in a nostalgic relation to a place that no longer exists. So much has changed since I left. To understand what's taken place, I wanted to hear from the people who live there now. I met 5 local residents whose lives mirrored my own in the different circumstances of Hong Kong today. I recorded their experiences in Hong Kong's first post-colonial year. I also gave them cameras so they could make their own video diaries. As the year went on, there was not the expected political turmoil. But in the stories of these 5 young people, I discovered the more personal struggles that shape Hong Kong today. This is our journey for the year.
So last year it was 20 years of handover, and we have a screening at PMQ, and I finally located some of the subjects. They were hearing impaired group, and they saw the film. They were very, I mean, this is like life change ahead, flashback and flash forward. And some of them already have a grown kid, and it's like to see Hong Kong in the you know in lights of 20 years ago was quite amazing. I think that's what documentary is powerful in a way. It documents time and also an era. And also, that was a very personal film for me because, I was trying to find, the past, and through my own personal story, I try to understand my parents as well. And then the young people, they tell their own story, their own struggle to live in Hong Kong today. So that was my first documentary. And in between, actually, making your own film is not easy because you'll constantly have to write proposal and get rejection. And I still keep working as an editor in order to, writing my proposal to get grants. So in 2001, I was hired as a series editor on Becoming American, the Chinese Experience, and that was a 4.5 hour long film about the Chinese American in the U.S., and it's a very amazing film because it documents from the gold rush time to present day Chinese experience. And the film was produced by Bill Moyers, a very famous, well-known and well-respected journalist. And the film actually now is being used in high school in the U.S. as a study in Chinese American history, and a study guide is being made, and that's when I met Alice in New York in the history. And the film was funded by Committee 100 members. So at the, I worked with the producer, Thomas Lennon, of the series, and somehow and Bill introduced me to Dr. David Ho. He's a HIV/AIDS scientist. And at that time, right at that time, there was a lot of news about HIV/AIDS in China. And I was actually, Tom encouraged me to make actually a film about AIDS orphans in China. And actually, he said, I mean, making one film and from about HIV/AIDS and then show it overseas doesn't help, because the impact is really about China. So we spent 3 years trying to get funding, and we make a big project. It's called China AIDS Media Project, and we have public service announcement and making short films to show in China. And of course, it's almost impossible to do that. But being, you know, very idealistic and thinking, oh, knowledge can change the world, and being a idealistic documentary filmmaker, and we did try, and we got the funding, and then my husband and I, Lambert Yam, both moved from San Francisco to Beijing and start this project, just knowing a few people. But luckily, we have Dr. David Ho introduced us to the Tsinghua University. We have, have consultant, and we have, then I start up a whole crew, young people, very young, just fresh out of university. And the reason why I like to hire young people is that they have no preconception. I asked them, are you okay working with a person with HIV/AIDS? And they said yes, and no discrimination. And it's just like fresh. And I think that's the whole thing. And I don't want someone with, it's like polluted mind, and they have worked in an industry which has probably some sort of habit already. So I train a bunch of 10 people and start from scratch. And we did public service announcement. We did short films for HIV awareness. And that was a good time, because in 2004 and 2008, that was right before the Beijing Olympics. And it was a great time. The media was open. Journalists can do a lot of reporting without any stop. And lucky enough, it was a lucky break. And also at that time, 2003, I don't know whether you remember, there was SARS. It was a very, really, China at that time, really aware of public health issues. And so they know that, if they don't do about HIV awareness, it could be, China can become Africa. And so at that time, the administration, the leaders were very much supportive of public health campaign. So that was, the story is that, as a documentary filmmaker, you have to seize opportunity to make films, because sometimes, you see a good story, you just see that this is a good time to go in and do a story. And then even with some sort of naive thing that you can do something in China, I seize the opportunity. And I think that was a gamble you have to take. And a lot of time, actually at that time, my friends and my relatives in the US said, it's too naive, you shouldn't be giving up your home in the comfort of the US and go to a place that you have no connection, no idea, and you are too crazy. And guess what? I Lambert and I did it, but with a lot of risks. And so we actually make films for CCTV. That was unheard of, because people said, "Oh, how much money did you pay them?" I said, "Nothing," because we make very good program, and it was free. And then they took it because there was a time that the government said public health was very important, and they show it. And so it was, and also we cooperate with the with the health, public health and health, Ministry of Health, and they were at the educational department. They were happy to show the PSA, the public service announcement that we made, because at that time, way back in 2000, now 15 years ago, there was no public health, public service announcement about public health. But of course, things have changed in 15 years. And so, we grabbed the opportunity. So, and also one of the film that we made was, of course, the Blood of Angel District. And that was the film that we think, well, we're not going to have censorship. We're going to make this film. And then it will be one film that we're going to take it out of China and show it overseas. And, my producer, Thomas Lyland, he saw the rough cut and he said, well, this is a great film, a great project. And he has experience of getting nominated in his other film. So he said, well, why don't we give it a try and submit it to the Oscar. And without any, I have no idea how it was the process, and he did it. And so, and it got a lot of publicity, and a lot of it goes to the AIDS orphan, and that was about stigma. And so there's a very good spotlight was shined on the subject matter, and that's I think getting an award is secondary, but the awareness given to the HIV people and the stigma they face was phenomenal. And all the Ministry of Health, they used the film for each World AIDS Day, they used the film to show and teach people about, stigma about HIV awareness. So that was a great bonus for making the film. I'm going to show the, not the trailer, but I went back 10 years later and revisited the children, and it was such a joy to see them. Because I lived in Beijing for almost 10 years, I kept in touch with the young people in the film, and I went back in 2013 to make a short film about them. Let's show that film.
他爸跟他妈都死了，这一个小孩给传染的有吗？不知道他咋弄的。
他讲的，就给你妈给你爸死了，然后你这病了，俺家姐不给你玩。俺哥去跟那学上3年级，俺给他一个桌。他叫老师不叫俺给他一个桌，叫俺给他分开。
当时去的时候，那个小女孩这楠楠13岁，她和她的姐姐2个孤儿生活在一起。这是我第一次看到艾滋病人是一个孩子。回来之后，我就说咱们是不是成立一个协会来帮助他们？ 10年了，最大的改变就是孩子们的变化挺大的。
现在它是一个鱼，看，它是一个。
那时候我还小嘛，跟别人玩，别人都躲得我远远的。张妈妈，带我到这个学校学习，就开始有人跟我玩了。
我当时就教他的时候，我心里也是很害怕的。
可能大家这几年、10年对艾滋病的了解是很多了，也知道哪些传播途径。
这现在都很正常了。
我们吃饭都在一起。
我们吃饭都是在一起。
对，好。其实艾滋病真的没有什么，因为那些小孩都很可爱。你时间久了，你就觉得当一个正常的小孩一样，他甚至比普通的小孩，内心更要丰富。比下来是吧？很好，很好啊，很棒。你要教旁边的小弟弟话。
飞行员。
排行榜中，安徽省进入省级行政区前10名。7月5号，我省首批援藏版火箭复转。
是你介绍的？
我跟我朋友一起去吃饭，然后带着他一起，然后他们俩就是忽然之间就一见钟情了。他现在就是幸福吧，每天就是幸福，就是开心的笑，很开心。
他长得比较可爱吧，人还好，就是人对这个病都很害怕了嘛。当时我也想啊，但是有点矛盾心里面。就有人很喜欢他吧，如果要是把给他分开吧，因为这个事情给他分开吧，就感觉都很不值得。
就给找那个人给他想买
我们在淮南联合大学学习会计。
我高3毕业了，考大学，报的是天津大学。
自己以前特别内向，不爱说话，现在也挺自信的，反正都过来了，就那一种感觉。因为从一开始，我看到这些孩子需要帮助，一做就是10年，也没想过今后会怎么样。我最大的希望就是让他们能够就像平常人一样简简单单的生活，这是我最大的希望。希望我的宝宝让他健康成长。
So fast forward to Hong Kong. So in 2013, I was asked to do a film on a group of underprivileged high school students. They were labeled as being band 3 student, and they don't do that well at school. And so at that time was still, actually about thinking about moving from Beijing to Hong Kong. So I start working on the film, followed them for 6 months, and they were participate in a musical. And through the musical, there's this very strict director, and with the musical, they learn about discipline, about themselves, building confidence, and their whole summer, their lives were being, I would say, transformed for at least for that whole 6 months, and the film actually was meant to be a theatrical film, and it was shown in Hong Kong for almost 6 months, and right at the time where the umbrella movement began. So the premiere was coincide with the umbrella movement. So there was a very interesting time. We have umbrella movement, the student protesting, and we have the film about the underprivileged students showing in the theater. And somehow this film, a lot of the high school principal really liked the film, and it just the film was shown probably over 400 times at high school screening. So I'm just going to show you the trailer.
即係我之前係嗰啲咧，好衝動，有咩都要行頭，打到贏為止。
我嘅掙扎就係俾機會佢緊要啊，還是要拎走晒佢啲壞習慣緊要？咁我係揀咗俾機會佢。
你想嚟做乜嘢先？你係咪想嚟突破自己？你係咪想嚟真係可以企喺台上面，可以做一出好戲俾人睇咧？
我唔係因為我睇唔到嘢而唔開心，係屋企人突然之間一個仔睇到變睇唔到，咁佢有啲朋友佢又唔係咁想透露俾佢聽。最後一樣就係我想同我媽咪講嘅，好似坐喺嗰度嗬。我喺度。
喺度。
多少意去盡放開，開心快樂無懼風雨，風雨過後我更珍惜你這份愛。
So I think I really like to work with young people because when young people they're very open, they they usually can openly talk. They have less of a guard, so and for a documentary is very important because they can willing to share their experience or tell their own feelings in front of the camera. And also the changes is very obvious. Of course, when you see the Bloody Angel District time, 3 years old was 13, you can see the huge changes. In a film, you can, capture that, and that's where you can see the impact Um, and so, you know, I I would advise young people, if you want to really capture changes, to work with young people, and you can really, you know, if you 1 year or 2 years, you see the changes. And documentary always take years to make. You know, people take 5 years to make a film, right? And even the look at Minding the Gap, just got nominated. He started capturing his childhood friend 10 years ago, and then see the changes in their life, and that's really powerful, because in narrative film you use an actor, and you try to, you know, act from young to old, but in documentary you see them grow, and that's the power of the media, the camera. So, well, with the success of My Voice, My Life, I was very lucky to have the Lee Hyson Foundation to support the film. And when I start teaching at Hong Kong U, and I start my fellowship at Hong Kong U, I see that the need to have more documentary made in this region, in Hong Kong, because, you know, in Taiwan, they have very mature documentary community. They have documentary show in theaters. But in Hong Kong, it's so hard to get your film show in the theaters. You have very limited slot. And also, people don't expose to a lot of different kind of documentary, because there's mostly documentary, there's different type of documentary made in overseas or all in English. It's not, they don't necessarily can see in their own language. And only very few mainland Chinese documentary are shown in Hong Kong because they're a little less accessible. And in Taiwan, the film is a lot more accessible, but there are very few films they show in Hong Kong. So I proposed to the Heisen Foundation. I said, I want to start a Hong Kong documentary initiative. I want to have three things, very simple: to have master class, dialogue with filmmaker, and seed grant. So we give grants to Hong Kong-born filmmakers, and actually it doesn't need to be Hong Kong-born, as long as they have a Hong Kong ID. 70% of it given to people with Hong Kong ID, and 30% we can give it to people from the region, from mainland Chinese or from Taiwan. So so far, this is our 4th year, and we have funded 13 seed grants. 5 of them already been finished, and actually we were very lucky. Gateless is one of the films that's shown here at AS Society, and they just got acquired by Al Jazeera, and they now show it at Al Jazeera. You can see it. They cut a 22-minute version, and well, of course, it takes years to be a filmmaker, and so this is our 4th year, and then of course the grant got finished, and we're now in the process of applying to Hong Kong government for more support. But we also videotape all the dialogue with filmmakers and all the masterclass. We are in the process of making our archive available and make it have Chinese subtitles, so that people in Taiwan and mainland China can see it. And that will be, by the end of the year, we have all the archive organized, and we're going to promote it on many platforms, so that more people can learn from these filmmakers. They are all very well-known international filmmaker. We have we're fortunate to have Herzog. He came and speak, and which recently we have Christian Fry, who made War Photographer. It was Academy Award films, and also he brought Genesis 2.0, and it was a very important film about about genetic engineering. And many filmmakers that came to show the film at in Hong Kong International Film Festival, and we collaborate with them. And each year we have up to 8 filmmakers, and they come to the University of Hong Kong to have in-depth sharing, an hour and a half with talking about their film journey and showing their film. So this is all videotape, and so hopefully next year it can be available to be seen. And actually, some of them are already on YouTube, but they are not organized by theme. And last year, I worked with 2 filmmakers from Malaysia. They make a film about their latest election, and the film is just finished and will be shown at the Cannes Film Festival at Dock Edge. And also another film that I am the producer is Last Stitch. It's about 3 generations of tailors who the filmmakers' parents are tailors, and so that film will be also shown at Cannes Film Festival. And I want to show this Last Stitch first, and then I will show the M for Malaysia trailer. Then we open for Q&A.
就喺1997年來臨之前，我哋一家要移民去加拿大。咁我就認真咁諗，係時候要將我屋企嘅裁縫生涯記錄落嚟。
我最後一個老人，我嚟咗10幾年未識過一個退休嘅。我哋屋企3代都係做裁縫嘅。上海解放之後，我爸爸去咗香港嗰度發展。
我時時咧睇住啲衫咧，我就喺度思考點樣可以邊啲位做好啲啊！早20年咁啊，冇辦法啦，老咯。
啱啱嗰陣時，千灣酒店要收翻個工場啊嘛。
但係呢啲嘢係一雙手咁樣做，但係你會靠一雙手就做唔到啲咩嘢。點樣繼續行落去咧？
有時啲嘢係要完就完嘅。
Hari ini yang sebenarnya rakyat terseksa hidup. Kerosakan negara teruk.
Rasuah inilah yang merosakkan negara kita sebenarnya.
Kita akan memperhebatkan lagi negara Malaysia kita.
We have a Prime Minister that is recognized throughout the entire world as the kleptocrat.
More than $1 billion in assets stolen.
I thought 5 billion ringgit was a big scandal. It became 50 billion ringgit.
They are already fiddling with the results without even having to go through the whole election.
There should be a change.
We need a change.
This is a country where the median age is 26. You choose as your designate premier a man who's in his 90s. It was like, oh my God, what's going on?
That they would accept me is as clear as my accepting them.
We're talking about the worst rivalry that we have ever seen in our history.
He is offering Malaysians a chance to right what was wrong.
Ready?
Able and willing.
Wow, I can't wait to see either one. I mean, I've already seen everything except those last two, so we look forward to showing them here at Asia Society. We're going to open it up for Q&A in a minute, but I have one question that I wanted to ask. We had a discussion earlier, and you mentioned your mentor. One of your mentor is your husband Lambert. But in terms of films, when you were growing up, I mean, I know you said you were an accidental filmmaker, but were there a filmmaker that kind of really like inspired you, or somebody in the film business, or just somebody who inspired you to go into the artistic field?
These very obscure filmmakers that went to art school, I don't think anyone will know. For example, James Broughton, Stan Brakhage, Gunnar Nelson. I mean, these are the artists, and they are so passionate about their work. And those are the people who inspire me. And I remember when I gave at that time in 2007, they still have Errol Morris interview people right before their awards. And Errol Morris actually asked me, who's your hero, or who inspire you? And I mentioned Stan Brakhage. And then guess what? That line was used in the telecast.
Oh.
And I think only the arts people recognized that word. And actually, I said that I have the interview, and then his assistant came up to me and said, "Wow, Stan Brakhage, our favorite." And then at that time, Tom said, "Oh, that will be used in the film," and he already can't tell because it's so obscure, but it's someone that who were studying film, independent film, or the avant-garde film. That's will know his name, and I think it not necessarily can be like a big filmmaker. It's just an obscure artist.
Do you? I'm a film buff. I grew up watching movies. That's how I learned my English when I went to the States. My first time I saw a Chinese person's name on the screen, I want to know all about him. Have you ever heard? You've heard of probably, but I bet you guys have never heard of it. James Wong Howe.
Yeah.
How many of you? One out of how many of you? Those of you who have not heard of him, Google him. You'll love his movie. But you're right. It is. There are people who really inspire you, and then you end up in your career, and now I'm sure you're inspiring also many of the students, and so I think I already asked my question, but I'm going to save it for you guys. But in terms of right now, also one of the questions I also have for you has been about women in the film business. The Me Too movement really started in Hollywood, unfortunately. I mean, thanks to Mr. Weinstein. What have you experienced in this field as a women filmmaker, and also as an Asian American filmmaker? In some ways, almost double whammy, but you've made it. So, kind of talk about that experience if young women are interested in making film. And your journey definitely is serve as inspiration, but the difficulties along the way, sexism along the way.
Actually, I think being Asian already is tough in the business. At that time, I don't think there are any Asian female editors. Only maybe there's one in Jean is in New York, and people who can even speak Cantonese. Nobody. So I was hired by Wing Wang on Dim Sum as the Cantonese post-production person. Always that was an advantage. And, it's tough. I mean, you basically hire I was started also in sound as well, because that's where a lot of women work in this post-production sound. and very few editors. But as I would say, more women editors. I don't know why. Maybe they have a little more patience. But in terms of applying grants, being Asian and being a woman have advantage because you're double minority, and so that's advantage. But in terms of employment, it's tough.
Okay, I'm going to open it up. Okay, please.
Hi, my name is Eric Lowe. I found out that we have lots of things similar. I was born in San Francisco, but I grew up in Hong Kong. And I also worked with Wayne Wang in Eat a Cup of Tea, because I was working for a celebrity in San Francisco called Wu Zhengqiu. You know, he had a radio show called China Today. So because I was a DJ there, I was used as voiceover with him. So interestingly enough, so we did, and I'm very inspired into the media because of my early television in Hong Kong and learning Cantonese and everything. So later on, I also did my own film in 2006 called Spaces of Desire about gay life in Hong Kong. But interestingly, a question I want to ask you, well, of course we can talk later about other stuff, but the point is that, you know, doing this, you know, a lot of people say, it doesn't make money. You know, doing this, you know, Hong Kong people, of course they make money. You know, you want to be the next Ang Lee, you know, the big ducks and everything. Oh, doing documentaries, yes, it's accolades, it's Oscar, but, you know, like in terms of intake, you know, Hong Kong Chinese people always talk about the end game. So how did you support, you know, like making these kind of things, making them, you know, pay for your work? You know, that's my question.
Well, luckily, I'm an editor as well. So usually in documentary, as an editor, you get employed for a long time, like 9 months, and then in between editing job, I apply for grants, and I think you know, that in the U.S. it was a good time for independent filmmaker in the 80s and 90s. Now, of course, it's difficult, but there are also other venues open now. You know, now you have Netflix and Amazon.com, and you have crowdfunding. And so, you know, being an artist, you have to be very resourceful. I mean, you're always finding ways, but it's a difficult life. I think it's more difficult in Hong Kong because it's so expensive here, and because it's a very commercial world, and they don't necessarily value your work. And you know, in the U.S. they value the social impact, and making a documentary, you can find distribution. You can, of course, you know, try to sell it to PBS, but it's getting harder because there's so much more films now. But there's also, you can work on the side doing corporate work, corporate jobs, and, you know, sometimes doing commercial. You know, even Errol Morris, he does Apple commercial to support his film. So you just have to be resourceful. That's all.
I think that's a very interesting point, because I find a lot of corporates, what you guys do really well, filmmakers, is right now we're living in a visual world, storytelling through visual medium. So whether it's making documentaries or corporate videos or other things, I think other people will pay for that storytelling. So that's a really interesting point right there. But any other question from some of you, please? If you can identify yourself too, also what university or what school you're.
Sure. Okay. My name is Misha, and well, I'm from Russia, but I'm studying in Hong Kong University, and exchange here. And then I'm not studying cinema, but architecture. But I find it it's my hobby, let's say, to watch movies and somehow participate in small filmmaking here and there. And I find it very interesting how there are many sides of filmmaking. For example, you're talking about documentary films, but you started in the avant-garde filmmaking, making short films. And my question is, how do you, because I think we can agree that the documentaries are about telling a story, as other films, but especially documentaries, and making some point, whether it's a political point or more concerned with the society or etc. And my question is, how do you maintain this objectivity? Because any story, you'll have your own input into it, and the way you tell it, of course, affects the story. So how do you maintain and stay objective while telling the story and showing real people? You know, because I think it's a hard thing to keep this line.
That's a very good question. I think picking your subject, and it's very important. You also, before you start, of course you do a lot of research. You really know the subject very well, and so if it's the person telling you something, you of course have to fact check it. You know that whether he's telling the truth or for his own advantage. I mean, that's the thing. And if you're doing a commission film, corporate film, that's different. But because you have a client, then you have to use the point of view. But in your own film, you have to be very careful. You just have to do very thorough double checking the facts, especially if you're doing a historical documentary. There's so much fact checking involved. When on Becoming American, we have a team of 5 associate producers fact checking, reading all the books, and also when the person tells you something, and we have a transcript, and also we double check and fact checking. So that's the thing about the documentary, and so yeah, and of course you show empathy for certain subjects, but it's okay because it's also you have your own point of view, which is okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, if not, I'm going to ask.
I have questions. Well, I'm not a student from Asian Society, but I wrote a paper about documentary and mockumentaries when I was in university. And there was a big argument in class between the students and the professor about should mockumentaries defined as part of documentaries or fiction movies, because now the mockumentary is kind of like mixed of two. So, and also what do you think, and also what do you think about the fake news or those, how they impact about the documentaries now?
It's nowadays is so you have to be so careful because of course mockumentary. I mean, as a good journalist, you always, if you pay your source, you have to disclose it. There's always things that you have to disclose as a good journalist, a good documentary filmmaker. But there's so much out there. People sometimes take, mockumentary or take people with very strong view, or that they take it as facts. So, I think it's the audience has to be educated. You have to have an educated audience. Otherwise, you just take anything on Facebook and you think that's news or that's fact. So, mockumentary, definitely not documentary. It's fiction.
Question, because I watched a movie called 24 City about the former factory in China. It's a Chinese movie by Jia Zhangke. I'm terrible at this, but yeah, sorry. And I know that some actors were used here and there to transmit, to tell the story, to transmit this point. But then some people are considering kind of like a fake, like a mockumentary in a way, because it's not portraying the reality as it is, but it's inserting some, because of some political tensions of the military factor or whatsoever. But then I guess it's also the part, it's kind of the fusion of the two, but then it's still the main point is telling the story, although how you said it can be, you can have your own input, your own point of view. But then do you think should documentary stay within this frame, or it can fuse, and the mockumentary I think also comes into it, because I feel like it can be part of the genre.
Well, the strict documentarian can tell you in the Oscar rule, if you stage a scene, you have to disclose it. They're very straight about it. And nowadays, of course, people, they stage, and they also, like Zhao Zhengko, he's a filmmaker. So, but he used real people, and the film festival would put his film in a documentary section. So there's all this gray area. I would say, as Herzog said, he said, I'm just a filmmaker. Don't call me a documentary filmmaker or whatever. He considered he's a storyteller. So there are documentary filmmakers call themselves good storyteller, using real people, using real situation. But there are strict documentarians who cannot, everything has to be fact-checked and nothing can be staged. But as documentary or film getting more and more into this gray area, and more people using different tools to tell the visual storytelling, to tell facts, that's getting more and more sort of gray. But it's really up to the filmmaker to disclose. I think that's most important. If you use a fake, use an actor to have a situation, if you pay the subject, everything has to be disclosed. And usually at the end of the end credit, they say, about all those things, and it's important.
Hi. One thing I think is very interesting that you did this thing about the AIDS orphans, because my cousin also did his work. Chung To? Yes, he's my cousin on my mother's side. He started, actually from the AIDS situation in America, because he was in New York.
Actually, I did a short film on him.
Oh, really?
It was aired in China.
Well, I should see it. I haven't seen it. And interestingly enough, as you talk about the thing with the master class, I was very lucky because I came back to the States in 2008 and I left in 2014. I got to go to Turner Movie Classics. That's when I really start to learn about movies, because they have a master class with people like Woody Allen or something. They come and talk to the student, but in Hong Kong they're not available. So it's not easy to get involved, to get educated with this kind of, because they talk about like James Howe or something. James Howe, because it's shown a film. So every time you have someone of interest like him, he showed 5 or 6 films. Or like my first interest in the Asian American stars, of course, is Anna May Wong, because she's the first Asian lady, and she actually has an impact even in China. She went back to Shanghai and everything, and she was photographed with Wu De, so there's a lot of these kind of stories that are not told, or not, on a broad stroke sense. So how do you think that maybe your initiative can also expand into this kind of general knowledge on, for example, Chinese in Hollywood, or maybe how people can go to Hollywood, or maybe they can get their voices being heard?
Well, right now we just concentrate on documentary. I think, Asia Society can do.
And that's what I'm saying. Asia Society can. And by the way, I'm going to do a plug for our film, Finding Kukan. It was a documentary film made in 1942, and it won the Oscar in 1942. And we're going to be showing a documentary about that because the film was lost for many years. And I think this young filmmaker is gonna be here to talk about how she found the film and did rediscover the Kukan story. So it's 19th, May 19th. Come and see it, and I'm looking forward to it because I'd heard about the story from other Chinese American friends. So your point is really valid. I think a lot of institutions, and now it's sexy to talk about Asians and Asian Americans in film, thanks to Crazy Rich Asian. I have to give that a plug. But I think you're right. Filmmakers have to stay true and do their film. But I think it's institutions like Asia Society and not just here in Hong Kong. Our Asia Society LA and San Francisco colleague recently worked with the Sundance folks, and they feature some really young Asian and Asian American filmmakers as a partnership with Sundance. A few weeks ago, we hosted, this was a smaller event, but again, featuring Asians in Hollywood and Asians trying to break in or are already established. So I think institutionally, more and more, and universities, whether it's NYU Film School or USC or others, I think, and also I discovered James Wong Howe as a kid watching old movies. So I think I would encourage now, especially many of the films are available on YouTube and story of Anna May Wong. And I find myself the journey of discovering these filmmakers or these artists. We had the kite, we had an exhibition in Mocha about this. He was an artist working for Disney and San Francisco Connection.
Yes.
Also,
they did a documentary.
They did a documentary about him, and he passed away at 106. And the documentary is a wonderful documentary. I think you can watch it on PBS, and we would love to show it. And anyway, I'll find the title. But there are figures like that I think because for whatever reason they were not commercially successful or whatever, they're kind of wiped out of history. Kind of like the story we were talking about earlier. Next month we're going to commemorate 150th anniversary of the connecting of the Transcontinental Railway in the United States. As a Chinese American, we know we built the railways. The Irish came from East Coast, the Chinese came from West Coast. But when the story was written, and you will see photographs of it, Asians are not in there, Chinese are not in there, and it's the Irish and the
Italian,
the Irish, and the people who financed it. But the Chinese were literally wiped out. And now you have a lot of young filmmaker or descendants of that. They're writing themselves back in the story. And I think this is the power of medium. And I just wish China would make better film. You know, sometimes I think when you were talking about mockumentary and also now fake news, I think some of us grew up with propaganda films, right? And sometimes if it's bad documentary, and it's a propaganda, you kind of recognize it. But I don't know if young people today or people today recognize that. And so I don't know if you grew up with watching propaganda films, and we still kind of recognize it. Do you put mockumentary in as propaganda, and right now also these conspiracy films? It's very transparent now when you see it online, but some of them are done so well you really can't tell. And what your points about average, if a true filmmaker, you have to let people know. But when people don't do that, how do you? I mean, to me, it's a dangerous territory. But how do you tell the difference? I mean,
I guess watch a lot of film and have critical thinking. Well, you know, it's by experience, I guess. You know, if you have watched a lot of films and read a lot of news, you know that the minute the film opens about 5-10 minutes, you know that film is propaganda. And of course, you have to watch a lot of films to get that. But I think films are so transparent, especially, I mean, watching a small screen versus a big screen is a huge difference. I mean, that got, you know, got exaggerated, and you know it right away. But sometimes watching on like a iPhone, you might not see it. Actually, people don't hear it very well, and that's a problem nowadays. People are having a lot of media, in front of them, but how they kind of distinguish the good and bad.
Any other questions from the audience, please?
So we are making documentary and we all know like making documentary is a time-consuming thing. So from a proposal on the paper to a real documentary, how can you keep your documentary on the track as you want initiatively? Like as you want at first.
You mean from the concept to filming to have it ready? Yeah. Usually, as Nancy Tong is my colleague at Hong Kong U. She said that editing a short film's 10 minutes film takes her at least 3 weeks. So I mean, you really, for me, it's that when I film already, I already film as a sequence. I know that, when I did an interview, I would know that whether that works or not work. And when you film a lot, you get experience. You know what's the best moment when you film, and you know that you got the film or not getting a good film is by the minute you film. It's just by, because I'm trained as an editor. I edit so many films. I know what works and what doesn't work, but that's really by experience. So is by watching a lot of films also help, and by going to a lot of seminars also help you structure or finding a theme. But it's by doing it a lot, making films by filming, and you learn it also by making mistake. The more mistake you make, you know that's not to do it next time. And when you come back from filming a lot and you're missing this footage and the sound is not working, so you have to go back and film again. That's learning but from your mistake. So I mean, it's hard. Even even a commission film, you say, oh, that's easy. I'd make an 8 minutes commission film, but you have your clients, and they say, wow, this is not what I want. Go back and film again. I mean, every project, every film is a challenge.
The question I have for you, please, the question I have for you, your 1999, this is in Hong Kong. Have you thought about making kind of a sequel to that now that you have met up with the 5 character? So any thought about doing that?
No, actually, their life is kind of stable except one. So
kind of boring.
Well, I mean, that's not enough challenge. So I think you want to find meaningful subjects to capture. And I'm making a short follow-up on My Voice, My Life, the people in My Voice, My Life. And so for them, their life journey just began because they, for them going to high school is a good time. I mean, it's so protected. But a few of them already finished from college, and one is Qilok, the visually impaired student. Now it's going to Chinese U. So their life journey just began. So I want to capture that, and then until they go to the next chapter of their life. Yeah.
Did you ever watch that PBS documentary that every 7 years? Seven Ups.
Yeah.
And they follow them for how many years? Or how many until they're?
For 28 years.
Right,
Yeah.
because that's a documentary that has really very interesting following them is a family every 7 years. And I think you were talking about that earlier. I think they tried that with feature, and it was such a big hit. Remember Boyhood?
Yeah.
But it usually is documentary that had the patience and the to tell that story. So some of the characters that you mentioned, I think it would be interesting to know where are they, and that's why I really appreciate the revisiting the Blood of Angel District, because seeing that film, knowing that some of these kids are okay, and or 10 years later, or the variation, in their life, it's really, I find that fascinating. Before we close, any other questions? Please. You seem the only one to ask.
There's nobody else.
Please, please.
So I'm studying architecture and interested in film, and I find there are many relationships between the two, and especially we can talk about the time aspect or the spatial aspect. But what I'm curious about is in your documentary films, especially, I think you were mentioning also it's called Citizen Hong Kong. Did you accent on the space of the city as an important role in your city, in your film? Sorry, because I find that most people, when they watch movies who don't have any education in architecture, they would usually perceive actors as the main protagonists, and of course there are obvious reasons why that is, and the focus is usually on the subjects, but the whole environment as the backdrop, I think it's also very important, and how you choose the spaces where you want to film, and especially Hong Kong is such a urban dense environment, and I think it affects the life very much. So do you take the space and architecture of the city as an important aspect of your films?
That for sure in Citizen Hong Kong, because all these protagonists or subjects, they all live in different neighborhoods, and that was a very important part of it, telling the neighborhood in Hong Kong. And I always include seasons in my film, because that's passage of time, that's very important. And in case of the Blood of Yingzhou district, it cover spring and winter, and winter was a lot sad, and then as the film goes a little bit brighter, especially in the revisit, it's the summertime. Things are a lot more cheerful. And those are the things that you consider when you make a documentary. And as well in feature film, you have your own, you have sets and lights and all this stuff, but in documentary you can't afford that. So you just use the natural space. And finding a good space to film is very important. And for interview, you find a good location, you reflect the person's environment, and those are things to consider. And that's to do with art, my art upbringing, and I choose color very well. I spend a lot of time in post-production coloring, the scenes, because a lot of time in documentary you don't have control, you don't have lightings, because you don't want to have big crew, you just want to have minimum crew when you should go film. And so a lot of time you have underexposed situation, and you have very the lights are not perfect. Then in post-production you can really salvage your films. And now the software is so powerful that you can really make underexposed scene, make it watchable on a big screen. And color too. If you want to say something about sadness, and you just make the color cooler, and that's kind of stuff you can do. Some people will say, wow, that's not real, but it's enhance your storytelling. I think after all, you want to tell a visual story, a good storytelling, whether it's a documentary or a narrative film. So you have all your tools available to you. And I use music a lot, because music is another layer to tell the emotion. There's a film that I didn't show the trailer. It's called Tongji in Love. It's about 3 gay men in Beijing, and I use music a lot because that's really one of the subject I interview. He's very quiet. He doesn't like to talk. So how would I show his internal emotion? I use music that to enhance enhance that. So that's a narrative technique that I bring into documentary. That was done more and more so now with documentary made in the U.S. In Europe, people use less of that, and also the pacing is very different. The pacing is much slower in European documentary, and in mainland China it's very slow, and they don't use music, and so there's all kinds of now tools available to make a very good film.
Okay.
You're talking about
ladies. I'm expecting ladies. Last
Sorry.
question. I'm going to save it to one of you, please.
Yeah. You're talking about like in a lot of these documentaries, like especially in Europe, with the what they call it, British broadcast system, BBC. They use a lot of reenactments. For example, if you're talking about a historical figure, like and then they have an actress, reading a letter or a subject and just looking at the window. So what do you feel about in doing biography documentaries and using reenactments of situations? What do you think that is it helpful, or you think it's taking away from the reality of the thing?
I think it's fine. Ken Burns do a lot of that, and it's in historical films, and he would just film some just pictures like the Civil War, and he would have actors reading the letters, and I think it's bringing the viewer into the experience. I think it's totally fine. I mean, how would you tell a historical piece if you don't have people, actors reading the letters? How do you bring that experience to life? It's fine. It's the tools available to tell the story, or tell a historical moment. No, not actors paying. I don't. I actually I don't endorse that. But using voices is okay.
Okay, I am going to call on one of the young ladies, please. You have to. You have so many of you here. Please, one of you. Question. Yes. You get to come to Finding Kukan for free.
I don't know. My question may not be that. Okay. I'm Kathleen from Li Po Chen United World College. I'm just a high school student.
Very good.
And my question is that, because just now I heard you have captured a lot of clients, and I wondered, how did you find those clients, and did you reach any agreement between them? Because
what lines?
Like the people that you're capturing in the films. So, because you're exposing their privacy. So, I don't know. I wonder how did you get their permission?
I do have all their releases, because it's not news. News you don't have to, but they all have to sign a release. If I don't have a release, then I don't show them, because I have a friend who's a very famous camera person, Kirsten Johnson. She did a whole film in Afghanistan, and that the woman feared that if her face being shown, her family will be killed. So she ended up not filming 3 years and end up not showing the film. So that's the thing with documentary. You have to have the consent of your subjects, and it's very important. If they don't sign it, then you can have a internal screening. You can't show it publicly. Yeah, and then that takes trust and time. That's the one thing that documentary is tough, because it takes a long time, because you have to earn that trust. It's really hard. And I think in China, it was very difficult, because they would not sign the release, because it's a piece of paper. So I have very good introduction, and then I have to really show my whole year to show my respect for them, and so it's tough. And also because they fear for their safety as well. So you have to consider all those things. You know, it's a big responsibility.
Yes, please. Good.
Hi, Ruby. So sorry I'm late. I have a question. Is there any moments you want to give up to be a documentary maker in this male-dominated film industry?
Actually, no. Well, you know, when I was in China, it was a very hard time for me. I didn't want to quit, but it was a tough time. No, actually, in documentary, there's a lot of women directors. It's because it's easier to be a documentary filmmaker than a feature film director, because that's really male dominated. You know, just recently, you know, there's one woman who won the Oscar.
Yes,
Catherine Bigelow.
Bigelow.
Yeah, and she has the support of her former husband.
For her former husband,
ex-husband.
yes.
No, I would never give up.
Hi, I'm Sophie from HKU, and I have a very last question to ask about. I want to know, since documentaries film production is so time-consuming and it really takes a lot of passion and efforts to finish a documentary, so what makes you keep going on?
Well, okay, the kind of film that I am interested to make or I have made, advocacy film or film that I hope to make an impact in the society. So I think the film that I made, I have luckily make some impact in the society. And so every time, you know, for example, in the Bulawayo district, I made the film. I had a lot of trouble in China, but when I saw Gojun, the young boy, at the dinner table, and he was laughing and was really joyful, and he was no longer afraid to talk to people. And I think all those doubts that why did I spend a year to make the film have just disappeared. Because, I mean, when you see the child change, and when you see that the stigma he had, and then when the film make an impact on these children, and that's a payoff, and I think that's what kept me going. And I think maybe that takes a little bit of being an idealistic person, and that I believe that making documentary would be better, making good film would be better for the society. I think there needs to be good film made, good documentary made in this world. I think that's why I keep going.
Well, on that note, I think I want to thank again Ruby for being here, and we've had the pleasure of showing several of Ruby's film, including Rotoma, which is a movie that also was filmed. We screened it last year, and My Voice by Life. We've had some of the cast here, so we look forward to having you back. In fact, I've been thinking. I know my team knows this. Thinking about doing a Ruby Yang retrospective film series. So there's enough films that also to see kind of your career. And I have to say I haven't seen Citizen Hong Kong yet, but I think if it's possible, we'd love to be able to do that, so that some of the movies you may, it's also different to see it in a with people, and it's also different seeing it in a bigger screen. And so we hope to be able to do that with your permission, and also maybe have discussions afterward. And I hope you'll join us, because this is an area where I feel very, very strongly about. I think film is really a powerful medium, and whether it's feature film or documentary, but especially documentary. And those of you who are here, who are interested, I really encourage you to pursue it, because I think any story is worth telling. And I just don't see enough stories from people who look like me. And I think how many billions of people Asians are, and we don't see enough. Or if there is, it's not shown, I think, in a mainstream. I think right now some of the misunderstanding is that there are some of the stories are unheard, or the real story. So I really do encourage those of you who are interested in pursuing, and you have a wonderful mentor here, and also the Hong Kong Documentary Initiative at Hong Kong U, and many of the universities here who are some wonderful programs. So I really wish you all luck. And again, thank you, Lamper, as well. I look forward to hearing from Lamper in the future, because I think he also has some really interesting experience in terms of saving films that were literally discarded in San Francisco, and bringing it back to life, sharing it here with Hong Kong Archives. So there is just a lot of interesting stories that we need to preserve. And so again, thank you, Ruby, and thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you at future programs. And a small token of our appreciation, this is a catalog on Hong Chi Fan. If you have not seen the exhibition, and I know Ruby just went in to see it, Mr. Hong unfortunately passed away about 10 days before the exhibition opened, and he is another really interesting Hong Kong icon and artist who started his career here in Hong Kong, and then received a JDR, John D. Rockefeller grant, and had an opportunity to go to the United States in '69, and really influenced by some of the artists he saw in New York, and came back and created found his own voice in art. So I really encourage you all to come and see the show. Closed June 9th, and in catalog. Thank you so much. Thank you.